The auction square smelled of dust, sweat, and desperation. Wooden planks creaked beneath her bare feet as she stood on the platform. Head lowered, dark hair hiding most of her face. A thin rope circled her wrists, rough against her skin. She did not cry. Tears had already been spent long before this day arrived. All around her men gathered in loose circles. Some curious, some amused, others openly cruel. To them, this was not a tragedy. It was entertainment. The auctioneer cleared his throat and began listing her like livestock. Young, healthy, strong enough to work, obedient enough to marry. Each word felt like another piece of her dignity being stripped away. Her father stood at the edge of the crowd, shoulders bent, eyes hollow. His debt had grown like a disease, and when he could no longer pay with money or land, the lender demanded something else. He demanded her. A few weak bids were thrown out, followed by laughter. One man joked that she wasn't worth the trouble. Another spat on the ground and shook his head. The price dropped lower and lower until it barely seemed real anymore. $4, someone shouted mockingly. The crowd laughed loudly this time. A wife for the price of a cheap meal. The auctioneer lifted his hammer, ready to end the humiliation. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She wondered if this was the moment her life truly ended. Not with death, but with ownership. Then a voice cut through the noise, calm, firm, and unfamiliar. "I'll pay." The laughter stopped. Heads turned. From the back of the crowd stepped a tall cowboy, dust clinging to his coat, eyes steady beneath the brim of his hat. He didn't leer or smile. He didn't bargain. He walked straight to the table and placed $4 silver down, one by one. The sound of metal on wood echoed louder than the auctioneer's hammer. The auctioneer hesitated, then struck the block. Sold. The rope was removed from her wrists and replaced with silence. The cowboy offered no explanation, no promise, no threat. He simply nodded once and turned away, expecting her to follow. As she stepped off the platform, her legs felt weak. She had been sold, yes, but not to the man she feared. Still, fear followed her like a shadow. $4 had bought her future, and she had no idea whether it would be kinder or crueler than the life she was leaving behind. The marriage happened without celebration, without warmth, and without choice. A justice of the peace muttered the words, as if he had spoken them 1,000 times before, barely looking at either of them. No one asked how she felt. No one cared. A paper was signed, a stamp pressed into ink, and just like that, she belonged to a man she did not know. The word wife felt heavy on her chest, heavier than the rope that had bound her wrists at the auction. She expected the ride to the ranch to be filled with commands or warnings, but the cowboy said nothing. The only sounds were the slow rhythm of the horse's hooves and the wind cutting across the open land. She sat stiffly behind him, bracing herself for what would surely come once they were alone. Every mile felt like another step deeper into a life she never chose. Near a quiet river, the cowboy suddenly pulled the reins and dismounted. Without a word, he reached for the rope tied loosely around her hands. She flinched, turning her face away. But instead of tightening it, he sliced it clean with his knife. The rope fell to the ground. "You don't need that," he said simply. She stared at her freed wrists, unsure if this was some cruel test. He stepped back, giving her space, his voice steady and low. "I didn't buy you to own you. I bought the debt. That's all." The words didn't make sense. Men didn't pay money without expecting something in return. She waited for the truth hidden behind them, but none came. He helped her down, handed her a canteen, and looked away, as if her comfort mattered more than his control. When they reached the ranch, there were no locks on the doors, no rules shouted at her. He showed her a small room with a clean bed, folded clothes, and a basin of water. "You can rest," he said. "Food's on the table if you're hungry." That night, she sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet. No shouting, no footsteps outside her door. The house slept peacefully, as if nothing had been bought or sold that day. She noticed the door wasn't closed. She stood, heart racing, and pushed it open. The land stretched wide and dark, free and endless. She could run. She could leave, but she didn't. Not because she was trapped, but because for the first time in her life, she wasn't. The fear that had ruled her for so long began to loosen its grip, replaced by something unfamiliar and dangerous: hope. Freedom did not silence the past. It followed her like dust on the wind, settling into every quiet moment. She had only begun to believe she was safe when the sound of horses broke the stillness of the ranch. Men rode in hard and fast, faces sharp with purpose. At their center was the debt collector, his smile thin and ugly, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You think $4 erased what she owes?" he sneered, dismounting without invitation. His eyes moved over her, claiming her all over again. That debt didn't disappear. It just changed hands. The cowboy stepped forward, placing himself between them and her without hesitation. His posture was calm, but his hand rested close to his gun. "She owes nothing," he said. "The debt is settled." The collector laughed, signaling his men to spread out. "You don't get to decide that." The tension snapped like a dry branch. A gunshot cracked through the air, followed by chaos. Horses reared, men shouted, and dust exploded beneath running boots. She ducked behind a fence as bullets tore through the quiet morning. Her heart hammered, but she didn't freeze. She watched the cowboy fight, not reckless, not cruel, but determined. When he fell to one knee, wounded, something inside her burned hot and fierce. She ran to him, hands shaking as she helped reload his revolver. She tore a strip from her dress to press against his bleeding side. The collector's men faltered, unprepared for resistance from a woman they had already written off as powerless. When the shooting stopped, the dust slowly settled. One by one, the riders retreated, dragging their wounded pride with them. The collector spat on the ground before leaving, his threat unspoken but understood. Inside the house, the cowboy stitched his wound with steady hands. She sat across from him, watching the pain flicker across his face. The silence between them felt different now, earned, not forced. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "Why buy me at all?" He paused, needle midair, then met her gaze. "Because I've seen what debt does to people," he said. "And I couldn't stand by and watch it own another soul." Something shifted then. She had been sold as a wife, chased by a past that refused to let go. But in that moment, she realized she was no longer running. She had fought back. And for the first time, she felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by strength she never knew she had. The days after the violence were quiet, almost gentle, as if the land itself was giving them time to breathe. The ranch returned to its slow rhythm, feeding horses at dawn, mending fences under the wide sky, sharing meals without many words. She noticed how the cowboy never watched her with expectation, never reminded her of the paper that bound them together. Each day, her fear faded a little more, replaced by something steadier and deeper. One morning, he placed a folded document on the table between them. His hands were calm, his expression unreadable. "I went into town," he said. "This ends the marriage, legally." He slid a pen toward her. "You don't owe me anything. Not your name, not your time, not your future." She stared at the paper. Freedom written in ink, a clean ending to a story that had begun in humiliation and fear. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, reading the words slowly, as if they might disappear if she rushed. This was what she had dreamed of while standing on that auction platform. No chains, no ownership, no debt. She looked up at him. "If I sign this," she asked softly, "what happens to me?" He leaned back slightly, giving her space even now. "You go wherever you want," he said. "I'll help you if you need it. If not, that's all right too." The room was silent, except for the ticking of a small clock. She thought of the open land beyond the door, of roads leading anywhere. She also thought of the man in front of her, how he had cut her ropes, stood between her and guns, and never once demanded more than respect. She folded the paper carefully and set it back on the table untouched. "I was sold as a wife," she said, her voice steady now. "But I don't want to leave as someone running anymore." His eyes softened, but he didn't interrupt. "I want to stay," she continued. "Not because I have to, because I choose to." A slow smile crossed his face, not of victory, but of understanding. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the land. The forced marriage that had begun as a transaction ended as something rare and honest. Two free people standing side by side. not bound by debt or paper but by choice.